Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm 89 Technical. It's time for my technical critique. Today we're reviewing Season 2, Episode 1 of Dragon Prince. I know. It's been forever since I reviewed anything. And I know I have a habit of every now and then popping up in my feed, reviewing something, and then not coming back for a year or two. But to be quite honest, this is one of the few shows that genuinely excited me enough that I said I have to make a review. I turned the camera around to show you, but I have a whole script written out and I've done all the reaction videos. All that's left is to record these reviews. To be quite honest, it is such a good show. Now, I know I don't have any right to ask anybody to watch anything that I make, but even so, I feel like this needs to be talked about, and it genuinely feels good enough that I can do it. So, sit back, relax. I hope you enjoy my critique, and as always, remember to like, remember to favorite, remember to subscribe, but most importantly, put a comment down below. Because after these episode reviews, I tend to go and do a discussion. Now, obviously we can't do a discussion today. Number one, it's been years since I put anything up on this channel. Number two, the few actually, no, I think I do have a couple of comments I can take a look at, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, but let's get started. Before I begin, I'm going to try and review these one episode at a time. Now, I know, this is a Netflix series. But just because it's a Netflix series doesn't mean we can't review individual episodes. It also gives time for me to reflect on what the episodes had to say, even though I've seen them all already. And to give you guys time to think about things that you want to discuss in the discussion portion. Alright, now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. So, Episode 1, A Secret and a Spark. Now, this is phenomenally done in terms of how you introduce a new story for Season 2. Now, full disclosure, when it came to Season 1 of The Dragon Prince, I did not like the first half. I thought it was very exposition heavy. I thought the dialogue was extremely clunky. I thought the animation was extremely weird. And I thought that the story was oversimplified. But as the story progressed, and we got further and further and further in, the last few episodes of Season 1 became really, really good. And they really should have reviews all in their own right. But in terms of Season 2, each main character's story arc is very well established. And in a general sense, you understand where the season's going to be going. In terms of the setup, you can basically divine where you're going to go. The season seems to focus more on Callum and Rayla's journey, as well as that of the villains in terms of Claudia and Soren. Now, I'll go into the specifics about the episode that I like and dislike a little bit later. But for now, let's focus on the characters, specifically Callum. Callum is set up as wanting to learn magic. Now, from the trailer, right? If you guys have seen the trailer, and I know you have, because like me, if you're like me, the second you saw the trailer, you went, oh my god, right? Because it's awesome. But from the trailer, and this is not really a spoiler, because if you're watching this, you've already seen the show, we see him use dark magic at some point. And the pathway to how he gets from where he is at the end of Season 1, giving up the power of magic and smashing his stone, to how he gets to dark magic, it suddenly seems obvious. Without his primal stone, he can't continue to learn and practice magic. So, as we hear him say, it's what he believes he is destined to do. However, Lu Jane quite bluntly tells him that as a human, he lacks the natural capacity to learn. And to be quite honest, she's a little bit of a bitch about it. When she's trying to explain what the moon primal is, and then she kind of goes and patronizingly touches him on the head. Oh, you're only human. And all that other kind of stuff she does. She's kind of a bitch. I mean, to be quite honest, she's not a very nice, she's not like this wise caretaker person. She's kind of just a regular she's kind of a below average regular person when you think about it. She's very patronizing. She's not very wise. She's kind of just there. Weird. Now, here's the thing. Despite telling Callum that he can't learn to use magic, that's very odd to me. And here's let me explain my reasoning for this. Now, maybe I missed something in the show, or maybe something was explained and I didn't catch it, but by the general rules of how fantasy things work, not everyone can just do magic in the first place, right? And we kind of see this in terms of Claudia and Soren, especially in like the end credits. When the two of them are kids, Claudia is working there's a single little image. Claudia is working magic with her dad, and Soren's kind of just staying there off to the side looking like, right? So, and we know that Claudia is much closer to her father than Soren is, because she can do magic and he can do magic, and obviously that's a touchstone that the two of them are going to be able to relate to, rather than Soren, who's very into being a bro, working out, that kind of thing, right? So, but hear me out. If magic is ubiquitous, right, that means that dark magic would also be ubiquitous. Now, if dark magic is ubiquitous, and it's a quality amongst all humans, so let's assume that anybody could do dark magic if they chose to do dark magic. Not that you would want to use dark magic for obvious reasons, right? But surely we should see more of this throughout Katalis, right? You should see dark magic users everywhere, but we don't, right? Like, think about the town, right? Think about the town that the two of them ended up going to. We don't see any dark magic, at least so far as we know. We don't see any dark magic users. We don't see any dark magic users throughout anywhere season 1, except for Viren and his daughter Claudia. So it seems that it's not very ubiquitous, right? We don't see it everywhere. Yeah, another thing, you never get a sense that Soren was ever taught or attempted to be taught magic at some point in his early life, considering his father's a high mage too on the ruling council of the kingdom, who also happens to be an expert at dark magic. Now, obviously Soren's a little bit slow, but even so, parents tend to imprint on their children, so it's very odd to me that this would be the case. Now, because of this, it seems very odd to me that you would give Callum the ability to work magic and then say, well, he can't work magic. See what I mean? So maybe this is how he progresses, right, towards dark magic in his overall arc. For number one, he's determined to learn magic by any means necessary, but he just can't do it, right? He doesn't have the native-born ability, right, of elves or animals or anything else, right? So because of this, it demoralizes him. He continues to try to do it. His inability to play a role in the group as he did before wears him down, and eventually he reaches a decision point. Either something dangerous happens, right? Maybe Rayla or Ezra or somebody gets into some kind of fight, or they're attacked by a monster, and he has to make a decision. Hey, do I just stand here uselessly, or do I do dark magic? And then that's where he ends up turning and doing that particular thing, right? Getting into the whole dark magic side of the series, right? And maybe that's where he ends up talking with Claudia, and Claudia's saying, well, you could squeeze the dark magic out of them, right? Maybe that's where it comes from, right? But maybe he ends up deciding that some power is, even if it comes from a bad source, is better than no power at all, right? Now, whether this changes him or he resists it, right? It's used afterwards. This is all hard. It's all speculation at this point, right? It's all speculation. However, the narrative for Callum seems to be him becoming a dark magic user, as established by where we are right now and what we know so far. Could it be different? Possibly. I don't know. But that's what speculation is for. That's what the review is for. That's what the discussion is for. Now, Ezrin, on the other hand, his task is much simpler. Teach the little dragon prince how to fly. Now, it seems that this might be fleshed out a little bit more in the future, but other than that, it seems to be helping the young dragon to find his wings. Now, one comment on the young dragon before we begin. In terms of writing character arc, I've always seen dragons as more wise, intelligent creatures, and we see that throughout the series, right? Whether it's Ava the wolf or Bait the glowtoad, they have their own personalities. They seem to be intelligent creatures who are capable of understanding things. Ozymandias seems to be marked or made more after a puppy, right? And I understand he's a baby dragon, but even so, the general aspects that one normally associates with dragons are, one, cats, because they tend to be more cat-like, and number two, or at least they seem to be in things like How to Train Your Dragon, and number two, they tend to be wise, intelligent creatures, right? Which is why I'm concerned that he's, basically a puppy for Ezrin to play with. Alright, now, Rayla. Rayla, she's now free from her binding, and she's basically going to be the foil, right? She's going to be there as their protector from their enemies. Now, how she's going to grow as a character, we don't know, right? She's kind of just there, right? However, since she's freed from her obligations of killing Ezrin and saving her hand, we can speculate, though. It's possible she could be a romantic interest for Callum or another character in the future, but I hope not. I like her as a strong female character, right? And reducing her from a badass to a romantic partner would only mirror so many other shows and not keep in line with some of the women we've seen so far, like Anta Maya in this series, right? They're all badasses, right? So I'd like if they didn't go that whole, oh, Callum, I have my two hands now. I'm a woman, you're a man. Clearly, the two of us must get together. I mean, come on, really? All right, now, as I mentioned before, I was a little bit off with the Dragon Prince being kind of a puppy, right? You would think he'd be more like an elephant or an octopus or a dolphin, right? Something that has, more intelligence, right? It kind of demeans his importance to be just, a pet. But, it leaves further development in the future. They can't develop everybody all at once. Okay, now we've discussed the four main characters. Let's get to the episode itself. As I mentioned, it's a great introductory episode. If I wanted to get somebody into the series, this is the episode I would show them. I don't know if I would show them something from season 1, to be quite honest. But if I wanted to get somebody into the show, this is the one I would show them. There are a lot of great moments, from the opening scene with General Amaya to the reappearance in the story of Soren and Claudia at the end. Every single... It's masterfully crafted. Much, much, much better than season 1. There's a lot of unexpected scenes and actions. So, for example, we see Anta Maya straight up kick 2 elven guards into lava. So they burn to death in the most horrible way possible. They go like Gollum when you think about it. That's crazy. It also shows that the writers are making very, very, very good use of the fact that they're on Netflix. They can be darker. They can show more adult concepts. They can actually show people dying and people getting hurt and terrible consequences for other people's actions, right? This is going to be very important because it means that the story can be more complex. It allows for further character development. I, for one, I cannot wait to see what happens next in terms of those characters there and what happens in general to all the characters overall, right? There's also a lot of questions. Oh, that sword, by the way. I can tell you a bunch of things about that sword right off the bat. The glowing Sunfire Elf sword. Number one, it's a much older sword. You can tell because down by the hilt, it's not... Remember the dagger? How it was almost white hot at the end and then kind of yellowy glowing near the bottom? This one was yellowy glowing for the most part and then red near the hilt. I want Anta Maya to get a sword like that. Can you imagine what would happen if Anta Maya had a Sunfire Elf, had a Sunfire Forged sword? Oh my gosh. Take her badass nature, right? She's a badass heavy, right? Take that add it to a Sunforged blade, she could win a fucking war, man. She's such a great character. I have been raptured by her. And the fact that she's deaf too, this show does a great thing when it comes to, showing characters that are kind of the underdogs of society moving up into a more prominent role. I hope to see more of that too, but we will see. So more badass than Maya. I hope she gets the Sunfire sword. That's an older sword too, as I said, because as Rael explained, those swords cool off over centuries. For it to go from white hot to red hot, if we're working on the 2-century model, that sword is maybe almost 100 years old. It's about halfway cold. So pretty cool. Weird nerdy moments with Aiden and Technical. Okay. Also, there's a lot of other weird questions that this show brings up. So, for example, with the whole worm eating scene, right? Does Lou Jane herself eat nothing but worms? Surely it cannot be that hard to find food on a mountain. I mean, it's a fun one-off joke, but it raises more questions than it answers. It's kind of unnecessary. Speaking of jokes, the jokes and animations are really well timed in this episode, I have to say. Right? A lot of people complained about the animation style. And I will admit, the 3D, right? The 3D in its motion leaves something to be desired. I'm reminded of Jane and the Dragon, which is a series that only aired in Canada and only had one season. But the 3D rendering in terms of the motion is pretty similar to that, despite it being 20 years older. And, we're almost in 2020. That show came out in like the late 90s, or maybe mid-90s, if I think about it. I don't remember. I have to look it up. However, I will say this. For the storybook style of animation that the show is using for its atmosphere, the animation of the 2D characters and the 3D motion works well, as if to make it look like they're characters in moving through the pages of a book in specific instances. And it makes the action sequences awesome. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, you probably could, right? Shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender, which all of these writers are from. And I always said, Michael Dante DiMartino was one of the weakest writers on that show, despite being the main writer. Season 1 left a lot to be desired, but Season 2, just from the first episode, it's much, much stronger. And I'm starting to think, you know what? Maybe these guys are showing, hey, we can field our chops just as well as the others. Because, to be quite honest, I'm more excited about this show, The Dragon Prince, than a new Avatar live action reboot. To be quite honest, I'd rather see a third series. Like, show me the next set of avatars. Like, do we have an earthbender avatar? Do we have a firebending avatar? Someone came up with a great idea. Have an avatar that has a twin, right? And one of them is the spirit and one of them is the bending, and the two of them work together. Because I'd like to see that. I have no interest in a live action version of Avatar. We all saw what M. Night Shyamalan did. Do you honestly think Netflix is going to do any better? You can't do in live action what you can do with a cartoon series. There's just certain things that don't work in CGI. But that's a whole nother thing. So I'm not going to go too deeply into that. But in terms of the fight scenes, right? It works really, really, really well. Some people are saying, oh, it should be updated to 60 frames per second. It should be. Everyone calm down. I'm certain they know what they're doing. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, 89 Technical, where's all the piss and vinegar you used to have? Okay, it's still there, right? I get it. The animation is not great. However, it does. I understand what they're trying to do, and I understand the limitations of what they're trying to do. So I'm not giving them a free pass. At the parts where the animation doesn't work, I get it, but look, there's nothing I can do that's going to change, and it doesn't really subtract from the story that much. The story is what's important, and the story is really, really, really well done in terms of characters, in terms of interaction, in terms of how we're getting started on the second season. It's really good, right? If I was going to nitpick, I think there are a couple moments that are weak and they could remove them, but other than that, it's everything they're doing is set up for something later. So I'm willing to give it a pass. Okay. Right? Shows like Korra, where I criticize the 3D as clunky, right? They had the same problem, but those are relegated to battle sequences for the first half of the series. So I'm more forgiving to it here, right? But the animation is improved on season 1, I will say, right? It's not as smooth in terms of small motion, but things like facial expressions are very, very, very important, right? In terms of how characters look at one another, the small moments that they have here and there. Like, for example, when Rayla, at the very beginning, when Rayla finds out that he's writing a letter to his dad, he goes, right? It looks like his facial expression looks like the facial expression an actual person would make, right? As does Rayla's, where she's kind of like, you can see the guilt tearing at her on the inside, right? What do I do? Do I keep this quiet? And that's something I'm curious about. Will Rayla ever tell them, right? Will it be resolved by Rayla? Will they find out in another way? Who knows, right? But it does offer some stress point and an excellent idea for contention and conflict on both the physical and emotional level as the show goes on. So whether the boys will find out that their dad is dead before the end of the journey is yet to be seen. All right, now, one thing I left out, right? Big fish. But I felt it needed to be left on its own. Let's discuss Viren. As always, he's placing what he feels to be correct above and before the wishes of those whom he shares power with, right? In the last season, it was kind of made clear that he's playing for the throne. And he has a lot of naked ambition that's in his previous actions, right? Now, if you told me that he deliberately provoked whatever attack on Zadia in order to facilitate the king's death, I wouldn't be shocked, despite all the contradictory evidence of him, trying to save the king, his relationship. He actually seemed to like King Hero, and he didn't take any relish in what he did, but one has to compliment the writers on the complexity of the characters, both the protagonists and the villains. That's one thing that differentiates this show quite a bit. None of the villains are cartoonishly evil. Their actions clearly come from a place where what they believe they're doing is right. Now, in a show like Airbender, now I want to discuss this for a little bit, right? Just to compare. In Airbender, this was taken to extremes, right? Where the long-term outcomes for people didn't matter, merely the power, right? The power that could be garnered through war. When you think of the Fire Lord, right? Or Azula, right? Azula is a cartoonishly evil character. But she clearly believes that whatever furthers the Fire Nation and her father's wishes is correct, because that's a society that she's brought up in, right? There's a whole big world that's built around that, right? And all actions of the villains in that sense make sense, right? The same thing with the Fire Lord, right? The Fire Lord believes X because this is the situation that he comes from, and this is the power that they gain, and clearly what they're doing must be correct because they're winning, right? That's why it makes sense that they continue to do what they do. Okay, so that's one way of justifying it, right? Now, those characters clearly believe they were right? However, their actions were clearly wrong. They did very, very, very bad things for not good reasons, right? Here, the line's a little bit less clear, right? The line is blurred. It's difficult to say that one person, outside either the Princess or Rayla, is wholly good or wholly bad, right? They're all people, right? But that's for another episode, right? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So, let's continue on with Viren's actions in this particular episode. Now, he's clearly convinced that he is correct, and as such, he's justified in making whatever moves he wants, right? To act like he's the king and threaten others to do his wishes shows that he trusts that whatever he does is correct in terms of any action. You can't write him off as evil, though. That's the weird thing, right? He may be arrogant. He may be self-assured. He may in fact be right. but he's not. He's not correct. He may be correct, but he's not right. You understand? He hasn't lost his soul, right? He's not an evil character, right? But we could say that he certainly has lost perspective as to the roles of others and things like decision making. The need to reach consensus, right? The morality of a decision, right? We've seen this before, both with the king and with his children. And while he may be able to order people like Soren and Claudia around without any issue or argument, it doesn't mean that it will always work, right? He kind of expects that people will hear what he has to say, consider what he has to say, agree with him, and then just go, right? He doesn't like being told no, even if he's wrong, right? Like, what happens next remains to be seen and is extremely interesting to consider, right? Now, a few final points I'd like to talk about. I don't believe Rayla will die. At the end, so the episode continues on, right? They're teaching the young dragon prince to fly. Callum figures out he can't learn magic, but he's going to try anyway, so good for him. Rayla's on patrol, right? They kind of fake her out a couple of dangers, but eventually, at the end, Rayla falls asleep, and this is where Soren and Claudia show up. She falls asleep because Claudia puts her to sleep with a sleep spell, and they draw the sword, and the sword is raised, and they're getting ready to cut her head off, and then cut to black, right? I don't believe Rayla will die. Number one, the trailer shows Rayla doing all kinds of stuff, right? So, dead giveaway already. Number two, I doubt that Soren would kill a sleeping enemy. I don't think he'd find it honorable, right? And it's going to be interesting to see how the group dynamics change now that Soren and Claudia become part of the group. So that's an interesting conflict that's going to come up in the next few episodes. Now, as to the young dragon thing, I have a few comments here. He's only a couple days old. He was born 2 days ago? He's far too young to learn how to fly. Why they insist on this as a necessary plot point has yet to be seen, right? I'm sure they have a good reason for it, but it seems an unrealistic expectation that a baby dragon would be flying instantaneously out of the egg, right? It would be like expecting an eagle chick to take flight or a baby to start walking, right? Immediately, right? I'm curious what will happen in terms of that, but we'll see. I'm also curious as to what will happen to Ava and Ellis, whether they're going to continue on or they're going to find some way to take them out of the show or, whatever, right? It would be interesting to see them kind of continue on with the group, but in terms of group dynamic, if you've got Rayla, Soren, Claudia, Ezrin, Callum, the baby dragon prince, Bait, plus whoever else, that's already 7 characters, right? 7 characters in a 24-minute show, that's like 3 minutes per character. You can't really do that in terms of how group dynamics work and how everything interacts. So maybe they'll drop them because they're already minor characters, right? They showed up for a couple of episodes, and now they're going to go back and do whatever it is that they're supposed to do, right? But I'm curious what happens there. So we'll see, right? I don't think they'll continue on, but they might. Also, it's very interesting to notice everyone's got piercings in their ears. Have you noticed? And it's weird to kind of consider, hey, they've got modern piercing, modern style, modern everything, but they're in a weird medieval setting. It's a weird fusion between our modern world and the setting of this particular world. It's odd. That's all. That's all I'd say. Let me think. Is there anything else I'd like to clean up before we finish up this particular episode 1? You know what? To be quite honest, I can't think of anything else. You know what? I think that's it for this particular review. The episode 1 was an excellent introduction. It reintroduces us to all of our characters. We get to see Rayla do jazz hands, right? And overall, it's a generally good episode. Like I said, if you ask me, of the episodes I've seen so far, which one would I use to try and get people to watch the show? It would have to be episode 1 of season 1. Alright, so that has been the review. As always, please make sure to like, fave, subscribe, And please, 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 leave a comment down below. It's the only way we'll be able to have a discussion. All right, I will see you next time.